When should I consider increasing or reducing how much I withdraw from my accounts?
Yeah, it's a good point. Because there's all these withdrawal rules, and take out 3%, take out 4%, take out 5%. There's all kinds of. There's a lot of articles on that, which I think is interesting. And so, I mean, one of the things that's kind of interesting, if you actually take a percent, right? Let's just say 3%. Let's say I have $1 million. I take 3% out. That's $30,000 a year. Um, and so then, if my value of that account drops, so would my income drop because I'm taking out 3%. That's actually fairly, I think that would work pretty well, at least in my experience. However, what I have seen is that people don't do that. So, in other words, if they were taking out 30,000, they've now locked in a lifestyle around that income, and combined with all their other income, Social Security and pensions and rents and those things. But and all of a sudden the market falls, and they still want that 30,000, and that's okay. Like in these type of downturns we're having now, they're kind of small. There's no real problem with that. But once we get kind of a bigger downturn that's really rolling to the downside, 2008, a 2000 downturn, those types of things, there probably should be some consideration for cutting back on that withdrawal, really, no matter what it is. Hopefully, it's not too high. Sometimes people are taking out too much to begin with. I mean, if you're taking out 10% of the value of your accounts, there's almost no market that's going to work for very long. So, there is some. For those people, you should be cutting back no matter what the market is. But for the rest of us who are kind of taking out something, somewhat reasonable, what I recommend is just be, able and willing to just kind of cut back a little bit in these bigger downturns. And the ideal scenario would be that you'd have some two components. Number one, the ability to cut back, what you're spending a little bit. And number two is maybe some cash buffer on the side so that, you could start to use that cash buffer for a while. And as your market market accounts are kind of falling down some because of these big downturns, and then that way you're not pulling so much money out of it. So, for example, if I have it's kind of an extreme example, but if I have $1 million account taking out 30,000, that's 3%. But if that account drops to 500,000, I'm still taking out 30,000. I'm now taking out 6%. It makes it much harder for that account to get back to $1 million. But if I could cut back, right, what I'm taking to maybe 15,000, still keeping it at 3%, and if I needed more money, I could get that out of some kind of cash buffer. So I think the cash buffer allows you to, alleviate some of the pressure that you're putting on some of your assets in that regard. So, there's percentages, there's actual dollar amounts, there's different things that people are looking at. I'm a huge advocate of being prepared for downturns in lots of different ways, but one of which is having a lifestyle that isn't completely fixed and locked in so that that's why if you can pay off your mortgage, that's awesome, and it just gives you some ability to cut back on some of your discretionary things a little bit. 2008, we all kind of did that anyway. And then secondly, to make sure you have some type of a cash buffer sitting there to live off of for a while. Maybe you can replenish that as the markets come back as far as that goes. But I think that's the best way to handle these situations as far as that goes and still stay, invested. Because unfortunately, we can't put everything in the bank because inflation is 6.2%. Last month was the report. We're not making that in the bank. The only places that really seem to do a great job of keeping up with inflation are real estate and stocks. So we have to have something out there for that purpose. Unless you have tons of money. If I have $10 million and only need 30,000 to live off of, that's a different scenario. I can have everything in the bank probably and make that work, but most people don't. They kind of have something, that they need to have out there. So if that's true, then having a strategy of a flexible spending strategy combined with some cash buffer, I think that's the way to go.
How many clients actually use like a percentage of withdrawals based on assets versus kind of like a fixed amount? Would you say a majority use like the fixed amount?
Well, no, I'd say majority actually use a percentage for a starting point. So, in other words, we get into retirement and we say, okay, what can we use? And we'll back test this using the Monte Carlo simulation and figure out, okay, 85% to 99% probability on Monte Carlo simulation, how much money can we spend? And it's usually some percentage, I don't know, 2% to 5%, someplace in there. Depends on the situation. And so it usually starts off as a percentage, but again, what then happens is it becomes like a salary. So I'm getting 30,000. And so, I'm using that, for whatever purpose that I might be, spending that on. And then all of a sudden, the accounts drop, and a little bit of drop. That's not a problem. That's normal. Like what we're dealing with right now, don't worry about it. Matter of fact, anything, probably up to 20% isn't a really big deal. Usually that works its way out. But just being prepared, to be able to kind of pull that back. So yeah, I'd say it starts off as a percentage oftentimes. Although the way we do it is a little bit differently. We solve for how much can be spent to meet the required, in our opinion, success meter in using the Monte Carlo simulation. And I don't really want anybody to be below 85%, and that's actually a pretty good number altogether. But obviously, it's even better to be at 90, 95, 99% probability of success with the amount of money that you're spending. So just the whole objective is to make sure that you don't get deep into your life and find out that you don't have enough money, because it's really hard to make adjustments at that point in time.